Now, we know the central banks, they are vulnerable right now. They're exposed. The global economy is slowing. This has nothing to do with tariffs. This has nothing to do with Trump. This has nothing to do with anything except the central bank. They're the ones who created this system. The system only lasts for a certain period of time. Then it breaks down. When it breaks down, the central bank normally likes to have an event so they can cover up what just happened. And this way it allows them to restart their system. The problem is they want an event that's big enough to cover all this up. That's normally a war. Instead, they're getting peace. How do you cover something up if there's peace everywhere? Peace with North Korea, peace talks with Afghanistan, peace talks with Syria. There's no event. So right now, the central banks, they realize and they understand, and they're worried, afraid, and scared because the entire world is slowing down. Their system is buckling under the weight of debt. It's all falling apart. And we're going to be talking about that in just a bit. But let's turn towards the United States. We know that the Federal Reserve, under the direction of the Trump administration, the Patriots, they have stopped raising interest rates. And if you don't believe this, and you believe that the central bank is ready to crash the economy, they would have continued raising the rates through 2019. They wouldn't have put themselves in a holding pattern and actually looking to lower interest rates once again, because that's not going to crash the economy. Raising the interest rates, that would have crashed the economy. We've seen it before going back in time. Just look at 2005, 2006, 2007. They did just that. They raised the rates till the system buckled under the pressure. Then they started dropping it really fast so no one would notice. And the whole thing just completely fell apart. This is what they were trying to do once again. Q warned us. They knew the plan. 2019, they were going to raise rates, and they were going to have the entire system crash in 2020. Now they are not raising rates in 2019, which means Trump, the Patriots, they are controlling what the Fed does. But the problem is that the Fed was raising rates before they took control. And a lot of things started to decline very, very quickly. One of them was housing. It's starting to stabilize just a little bit, but it's still pretty darn bad. Home prices, they're growing at their slowest rate since 2012. Existing home sales, they've rebounded a little bit, but pending home sales looks like they have slowed quite a bit. They fell by 1% month on month. And if you look over a year-on-year basis, you can see pending home sales, they are in a downward trajectory, actually 14 months in a row. And that's not good. So I would expect if things start to really fall apart, Trump and the Patriots, they're going to tell the Fed, listen, this is what you got to do. You got to lower the interest rates. And once that is done, people within this country, they're going to be like, whoa, and I'm talking about the investors, I'm talking about the speculators, I'm talking the people that work with debt. They're going to say, okay, good times are back once again. Now, we know that Trump, he has been manipulating the statistical numbers, just like Obama, Bush, Clinton, and most likely every president before them. And they had to manipulate the calculations. Why? Because the Federal Reserve, their system, the Rothschild banking system, does not work well in a real people's economy. If they didn't manipulate any numbers, we would have something like 18% unemployment, maybe even a little bit higher. If they didn't take control of the stock market would be a complete and utter disaster. If they didn't manipulate GDP numbers, the GDP numbers would be in the negative territory. So over time, because the Federal Reserve system was breaking down, the economy, not just here in the United States, but around the world, has been breaking down. They needed to manipulate the calculations to make it look like everything was fine. And this is what they've been doing for many years. Now, Trump has been using this to benefit his transition economy. Now, the people out there that are sleeping, they don't realize we're going to be going through a transition. What he's telling everyone is that look how great the economy is doing. He's doing this on purpose so the mainstream media, the deep state, the central bank can't say anything about it. They try, but it's very difficult because they would then expose themselves that they use manipulation in the past. So this is why they're not going to do it. But Trump tweeted out March 22nd, 2019, that we have 3.1% GDP for the year, best number in 14 years. And of course, what they tried to do is they tried to say, no, that's not the GDP number. It's a little bit less than that. He's lying, blah, 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 blah. But when you look at the numbers and you do a little bit of fact checking, you can see that, yes, he is telling the truth. If you compare the fourth quarter of 2017 to the fourth quarter of 2018, a common measure of economic growth for the calendar year, real GDP grew 3.1%, the highest rate since 2005. Using an annual average, real GDP reached 2.9% in 2018, tied for the best rate in more than a decade. So each time he does this, he is showing the deep state, the central bankers, he controls the magic wand. And the economy is going to look better than it has ever looked before. Why? Because he needs to borrow the money. Why? He needs to improve the infrastructure. He needs to use all the weapons against the central bank and the deep state. So he's going to use their funds and rack up the debt to bring us into a new economy. A new economy is forming right now. And we can see that the talks with China, they're going very well. U.S. officials are now teasing us that they are heralding major concessions from Beijing on forced technology transfers. And a top Chinese official told a group of American tech CEOs about a proposal to lift restrictions on foreign cloud computing companies. Chinese were talking about forced technology transfers in a way they've never wanted to talk about it before. Though differences on IP and enforcement, they still exist, but they went much further than they have ever done before. And we can see we're making incredible headway with the Chinese right now. And when it comes to tariffs, the U.S. will lift some of the tariffs, but not all of them, because they're going to use the other tariffs for leverage and to make sure that the Chinese are going to do what they're saying they're going to do. Now, that is going very well. What Trump is doing right now, he's preparing the old economy for the new economy. The old economy is a central bank economy. The new economy is going to be an economy without a private Western central bank, without the Rothschilds. And Trump needs to keep this economy up and running long enough. So he tweeted out his latest plea for OPEC to increase oil production, saying that oil markets are fragile and the price of oil is getting too high. Now, why do you think he wants lower oil prices? Well, businesses thrive with lower oil prices. FedEx, UPS, DHL, the post office, airlines. Lower oil prices, lower fuel prices means more profits for companies. Keeps the economy running, and he needs to do this past 2020. Long enough to bring us into a new economic system. And the central bankers, they're vulnerable. They're panicking right now. The IMF is warning the Eurozone. Now, remember, here in the United States has a printing press, the central bank. The Federal Reserve creates the currency. The U.S. government borrows it. And those in power can say, listen, create more currency. We need it. We're going to borrow some more. In Europe, there's their ECB, but there's many, many countries under the ECB where they loan these funds to these countries. Each country doesn't have their own printing press. That's a very big difference. The Eurozone, they've been following the lead of the central bank, of the Fed, because they are the reserve currency of the world, and they're preparing to bring down the entire economic system. The problem is that they don't have the Fed under their control anymore. So what does the ECB do? What does the IMF do? Well, they start to worry. They start to panic. And we see Christine Lagarde is out there, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund. She's worrying about the banks in Europe, that they're not resilient enough to handle a potential future shock. Why are they so worried about a potential future shock? Because they know that this economy is going to crash and burn. It's their economy. They know exactly what's going to happen. They know that their economy doesn't last that long. And they're saying something needs to be done. And of course, they're saying, oh, the banking system, it's safer than it ever was, but not safe enough. Well, that really means, let me translate that for you, is that we never expected this to happen. We thought the Federal Reserve, through the ECB, were both going to raise the rates, bring the economy down. We're going to have an event, and it was going to cover all this up. We don't have any of that, and we lost the Fed. Now we're worried. Because when the economy breaks down and falls apart, the entire European banking system is going to implode. So what do they want to do? They want to set up some type of insurance scheme to protect the banks. Now, let's think about this for a second. They created bail-in documents a while back, which says they can go into everyone's account and use those funds to protect the banks, because they realize that governments are no longer going to bail them out. That's off the table. So they're looking for a way to protect the banks, because they know the banks are not solid. They know the banks are going to go down. And if the banks go down, their system goes down. So they're trying to create this insurance scheme where countries, and it's called the European Deposit Insurance Scheme, or EDIS. They're saying this is the last element from the Eurozone banking union, which already includes a single supervisory and resolution scheme. This is what they need. Now, Germany, Netherlands, and other northern countries, they're a little bit worried because they're afraid that when everything falls apart, they're going to be on the hook for the repayment of deposits in countries like Italy, Greece, Portugal, where banks are more burdened by bad loans. So they don't know how to get out of this. And they're worried, they're afraid, they're vulnerable, they're panicking. And remember, Trump and the Patriots, they are in full control. They're preparing the United States for a new economy. And they're using all their weapons, and I say the central bank's weapons against themselves. And they don't know how to get out of this because they've lost control of the system. And they're completely exposed. And this is why you need to be prepared. Because we will be transitioning from one system to another. And when I say be prepared, have some food on the ready. Have some gold, have some silver. Protect yourself. Because you don't want to lose everything you worked for. You want to make sure that you protect your wealth. Listen, we all take out insurance. I know we're forced, but we take out insurance for your automobile. You pay this to the insurance company, and it's basically just going off to nowhere. You're actually just paying for paper documents, but it's an insurance policy just in case your car gets into an accident. You pay for health insurance just in case you get sick. Why don't you protect your wealth with gold, silver, cryptos, or anything else to protect your family? I mean, we've seen the history of gold and silver. We've seen the history of fiat currency. I mean, there's no real question about it. We know the central banking system is going down the tubes. We know that Q says gold is going to destroy the Fed. So protect yourselves. And I'm not saying you have to purchase these big, gigantic bars. I mean, that's completely impossible for the everyday person. But what you can do is you can purchase as much silver or as much gold as you possibly can. Some people, it might be 1 ounce. It might be 1/10 of an ounce. It might be 1/4 of an ounce. Or you might not even purchase gold. You might just go stick with silver. You might purchase junk silver, dimes, quarters, in bags to protect your wealth. Or you might purchase silver dollars. They're pretty cheap right now. They're like $14, with spot prices. And if those goes up, if those silver coins go up to 50 to 100 to 500, guess what you've done? You've protected yourself. You can purchase food. You can protect yourself with food, water, toiletries. There's many ways to protect yourself. Because when we go through this transition, it's going to be a little difficult for many, many people. Actually, we might see credit freeze up. I'm sure they're working on a plan so this doesn't happen, but in some cases it will. Listen, we came off the gold standard and we went onto the petrodollar system in the 70s. There were lines for gas. People had a tough time getting work. Things were a little confused back then. Think about it now. Now we're coming off the petrodollar system, a huge amount of debt, and trying to go back to the gold standard. Before we were coming off a solid system onto the petrodollar system. Now we're going the opposite way. And I'm sure the patriots, they're working out a plan, or if they've already have the plan, they're going to implement the plan to make this transition easier. But you want to make sure you protect yourself for this transition into the new economy.